They never tell you this part. Not in church, not in school, not even in most books that claim to explain life after death. In the final moment, when the body shuts down and the mind goes silent, a light appears, warm, familiar, beautiful. Voices you trust call your name. Almost everyone follows, and almost everyone makes the same mistake, because according to ancient teachings buried for nearly 2,000 years, that light is not salvation. It is the doorway back into the prison. And the one man who tried to warn humanity left behind a single word powerful enough to break the cycle forever. For most people, death is imagined as an ending, a final breath, darkness or heaven or nothing at all. But the ancient Gnostics described it very differently. To them, death was not the end. It was a checkpoint, a moment of interception, a threshold guarded by forces that do not want you to remember who you are. They wrote that the universe is not what it appears to be. That behind the physical world exists an invisible architecture designed to harvest consciousness itself. Human beings, they believed, are not just flesh and memory. Inside some of us lives a fragment of something far older and far greater. A spark that does not belong to this world at all. That spark comes from the monad, the true source, infinite, undivided, beyond time, beyond form. The monad did not create suffering. It did not create death. And it did not create this world. According to Gnostic cosmology, the physical universe was shaped by a lesser being known as the demiurge. A craftsman, not a creator, powerful, but ignorant. He looked upon the world he formed and declared himself the supreme God. He demanded obedience. He issued laws. He punished disobedience. And beneath him, serving his system, were the archons. The archons are not monsters with claws or horns. They do not need bodies. They operate through thought, emotion, and perception. Their domain is the unseen layer of reality that influences human behavior without ever revealing itself. Fear, guilt, shame, desire, confusion. These are not accidents of psychology. In Gnostic texts, they are described as food. The archons feed on low-frequency states of consciousness. War, addiction, endless striving, constant dissatisfaction. Civilization itself, they claimed, was engineered to keep humanity producing these energies in a continuous loop. But their greatest invention was not political systems or social control. It was the reincarnation trap. When the body dies, the soul rises, but it does not rise freely. Almost immediately, a light appears. It feels loving, safe, like home. Beings approach. Sometimes they look like angels. Sometimes like religious figures you trusted during life. Sometimes like deceased relatives. They speak gently. They tell you that you must return. That you still have lessons to learn. Karma to resolve. Growth to complete. This is the moment nearly every soul fails. The archons, according to the Gnostics, use this experience to redirect souls back into physical bodies. Before re-entry, memory is wiped. Everything learned is erased. The soul is sent back into another life to continue feeding the system. Over and over again, lifetime after lifetime, billions of times across history. Most souls never question it, but some do. The Gnostics called them pneumatics, spirit carriers, souls with a spark that refuses to go fully asleep. These individuals often feel like outsiders in the world. They sense that something is wrong but cannot name it. They feel drained by society, overwhelmed by noise, haunted by the feeling that they do not belong here. If that feeling has ever lived inside you, the Gnostics would say it is not a flaw, it is memory. And this is where Jesus enters the story. Not the polished figure of stained glass windows, not the simplified savior of institutional doctrine, but the teacher described in texts the church tried to destroy. In 1945, a collection of manuscripts was discovered in the Egyptian desert near the town of Nag Hammadi. These texts, hidden for centuries, included teachings attributed to Jesus that had been deliberately excluded from the official Bible. Among them was the Gospel of Thomas. In these writings, Jesus does not speak about sin or worship or obedience. He speaks about knowledge, not intellectual knowledge, but self-recognition. He tells his followers that the kingdom is not coming in the future. It is already here, spread across the earth, but people do not see it. He teaches that salvation is not something granted by an external authority. It is something remembered. And according to Gnostic tradition, Jesus knew exactly how the reincarnation trap worked. He understood the archons, he understood the false light, and he knew that only certain souls were ready to hear the truth. So he taught in riddles, in symbols, in fragments that would make no sense to those who were not prepared. But to the Gnostics, he gave something more direct. A name. Not a title, not a doctrine, a sound, 4 letters. The name was never meant to be worshipped. It was meant to be used. In the canonical Bible, traces of it still remain. In the Gospel of Mark, during Jesus' final hours in the Garden of Gethsemane, he collapses under the weight of what he knows is coming. And in that moment, the text records something unusual. Instead of translating his prayer into Greek, the original Aramaic word is preserved. Abba. Jesus cries out, Abba, Father. This detail is easy to overlook. Most readers assume it simply means father in a sentimental sense. But the early followers understood it differently. They preserved the word because it carried a frequency that could not be translated without losing its power. Later, Paul would write that those who carry the Spirit cry out, Abba, Father, not as poetry, as instruction. According to Gnostic understanding, Abba does not address the demiurge. It bypasses him completely. The demiurge presents himself as Father, Lord, Creator. Every prayer directed to him reinforces his authority. But Abba is not his name. Abba is tuned to something above his realm. It is the call of the true child to the true source. A direct recognition of origin. When spoken with awareness, the archons cannot hear it. They cannot intercept it, and they cannot interfere with what they cannot access. This is why the name was buried. The church did not remove it because it was unimportant. They removed it because it was dangerous. A population that knows how to exit the system does not need intermediaries. It does not need obedience. It does not need fear. So the teachings were rewritten. Salvation was postponed. Heaven was relocated to the future. And humanity was taught to wait. But the fragments survived. In burned texts, in desert caves, in whispers passed from teacher to student across centuries of persecution. And now, the idea is resurfacing again. Not because of coincidence. According to the Gnostics, nothing awakens randomly. When a soul is ready to remember, it finds the information it needs. Not through algorithms, not through chance, but through resonance. If this story feels unsettling, it is meant to. If it feels strangely familiar, that is not imagination. The spark recognizes what the mind has not yet caught up to. Because the next question is not whether the archons exist. The question is what happens when you refuse to follow the light. And that is where the name comes in. Refusing the light is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of clarity. According to the Gnostics, the false light only works because it feels familiar. It mimics love. It echoes comfort. It speaks in the language you were taught to trust. That is why it succeeds. Not through force, but through recognition hijacked and redirected. The archons do not need to chase souls. Souls walk directly into their system because they believe they are doing the right thing. This is why Jesus never framed his teaching as belief. He never asked people to accept a doctrine. He asked them to see. Over and over again, he emphasized awareness, wakefulness, recognition. He spoke of eyes that do not see and ears that do not hear. Not as insults, but as diagnoses. The trap only functions when consciousness is passive. The Gnomatics were different. These were the ones who questioned authority instinctively, who felt uneasy in systems built on fear, who sensed that guilt-based religion did not heal, but weakened. Jesus identified them immediately. He did not try to save everyone. He taught those who were capable of remembering. In the Gospel of Thomas, his sayings are sharp and unsettling. He tells his followers that when they know themselves, they will be known, that ignorance is poverty, that the truth does not come from outside. These were not metaphors, they were instructions for navigating consciousness beyond the physical body. The archons depend on one thing above all else: amnesia. If a soul remembers who it is at the moment of death, the system fails, the false light loses its authority, the voices lose their power, and the soul cannot be redirected. This is where the four-letter name becomes critical. Words are not just symbols. They are vibrational events. Sound shapes consciousness. In ancient cultures, names were not labels. They were access points. To know the true name of something was to understand its essence. Most prayers operate within the demiurge system. They are directed upward but never beyond the architecture that controls the physical realm. The demiurge listens, he responds, he rewards obedience, and he punishes deviation. This reinforces the illusion that he is the ultimate authority. But Abba does not address him. In the Aramaic spoken by Jesus, Abba was intimate but not childish. It was not sentimental. It was direct, a recognition of origin rather than hierarchy. When spoken with awareness, it functions less like a word and more like a signal. The Gnostics believe this signal originates from the spark itself, the fragment of the monad embedded in the pneumatic soul. When activated, it emits a frequency the archons cannot process. Their realm is dense, layered, limited. The monad exists outside all of it. This is why the name must be spoken from recognition, not repetition. Many people fail here. They hear the word, they try it like a mantra, they expect a sensation on demand. When nothing dramatic happens, they dismiss it, but the mechanism does not respond to effort. It responds to alignment. Recognition cannot be forced. It emerges when the soul remembers its own origin. This is also why the teaching emphasizes stillness, silence, inner listening. Jesus often withdrew from crowds. He taught that prayer should happen in private, not as performance. The connection he described was inward, not external. The church reversed this completely. As Christianity became institutionalized, the focus shifted from knowledge to obedience, from inner authority to external control. The teachings that threatened the system were labeled heretical. The communities that preserved them were hunted. The Gnostics were not destroyed because they were wrong. They were destroyed because they were dangerous. A person who knows how to exit the cycle cannot be controlled through fear of death. A person who knows the true source does not need intermediaries. They do not require permission to connect. They are not dependent. This is why the name survived only in fragments. In Romans and Galatians, Paul makes a strange statement. He writes that those who have received the Spirit cry out, Abba, Father. He does not explain why. He assumes the reader already knows. This suggests the word was part of an inner teaching, not meant for public instruction. Paul himself was a complex figure, a bridge between mystical Christianity and the emerging institution. His letters contain traces of the original knowledge, embedded just deeply enough to survive without alarming the authorities. But even these traces were eventually reframed. Abba became symbolic, emotional, safe. The frequency was stripped of its function. What remained was a religion of waiting. Waiting for salvation, waiting for forgiveness, waiting for heaven. Always later, always after death, always through an authority structure. The Gnostic message was the opposite. The kingdom is now, the exit is now, the knowledge is now. But only if you are awake enough to use it. This brings us to the moment that matters most, the transition. According to Gnostic texts, the archons cannot force a soul to return. They can only persuade. They rely on expectation, on habit, on trust. When a soul sees the light and moves toward it automatically, the cycle continues. But when a soul pauses, something changes. When the soul does not react, but observes, the illusion weakens. When the soul recognizes the trap, The voices lose coherence. This is when the name becomes effective. Abba is not spoken to ask permission. It is spoken to declare identity. It is the spark calling to its source, the fragment recognizing the whole. In that moment, the archons have no jurisdiction. Their realm ends where recognition begins. The false light cannot hold a soul that knows where it came from. This is why preparation matters. Jesus did not teach this as an emergency technique only used at death. He taught it as a way of living, a way of aligning consciousness now, so that recognition is natural later. Each time the name is spoken from stillness, the connection strengthens, the frequency becomes familiar, the soul learns to hold it without effort. This is not about escaping life. It is about remembering while alive. As this frequency stabilizes, changes begin to occur, not magically, but structurally. People who operate entirely within the archon system begin to feel draining. Situations built on manipulation lose their grip. Synchronicities increase because the soul is no longer moving blindly. The Gnostics describe this as the monad gathering its fragments. Not all at once, not dramatically, quietly, patiently, one recognition at a time. This is why the teaching always feels personal, intimate, as if it is speaking directly to you. That is not manipulation. That is resonance. The question is not whether you believe this story. The question is whether something in you already knows it. Because if the spark is active, the next step is not intellectual understanding. It is practice. And that is where the final instruction begins. Practice was never meant to be complicated. The archon system thrives on complexity. Endless rules, endless techniques, endless steps that keep the mind busy while awareness stays asleep. Jesus taught the opposite: simple, direct, internal. The final instruction was not a ritual. It was a return. The reason most people never access recognition is not because it is hidden. It is because the world is loud. Thought never stops. Identity is layered with roles, fears, memories, and expectations. The spark is quiet. It does not compete. It waits. This is why stillness is essential. According to the Gnostic understanding, before the word Abba can be spoken with power, the noise must fall away. Not permanently, not perfectly, just enough for recognition to surface. This is what the early teachers instructed. Find a space where you are not performing, not proving, not consuming. Sit or lie down. Let the body settle. Let the breath slow. Thoughts will continue at first. That is normal. Do not fight them. Observe them until they lose urgency. Then attention moves inward. Not to imagination, not to visualization, but to sensation. The quiet awareness behind sensation. The feeling of being present without narrative. This is where the spark becomes noticeable, often experienced as a pressure in the chest, a warmth, a longing with no object. This longing is not emptiness. It is memory without words. This is where many people feel emotion rise unexpectedly. Sadness without story, relief without cause, tears without grief. The nervous system recognizes something older than personality. When this state is present, the word is spoken. Not loudly, not dramatically, simply. Abba. The sound is slow, deliberate, felt rather than projected. Each syllable allowed to vibrate through the body. There is no request attached to it, no desire, no expectation. This is the critical distinction. The word is not asking the source to come closer. It is acknowledging that separation was never real. After the word is spoken, nothing is done. This is the part that confuses people trained in effort. There is no next step, no affirmation, no analysis. Awareness rests. And this is where the response occurs. Sometimes it is immediate, a sensation of expansion, a release in the chest, a sudden stillness where thought dissolves. Some describe it as being seen, others as being held. Some feel nothing dramatic at all, but notice later that something subtle has shifted. All of these are valid. The response does not come from the archon system. It does not announce itself. It does not demand loyalty. It does not promise reward. It simply aligns. Over time, this alignment becomes familiar. The word no longer feels like a sound. It feels like a state. This is the preparation Jesus emphasized. Not for comfort, not for peace alone, but for the moment when preparation matters most. At death, there is no time to learn. The transition happens quickly. Habit takes over. Recognition must already be present. This is why the archons depend on reflex, the automatic movement toward the light, the automatic trust in authority, the automatic surrender of awareness. A soul trained in recognition does not react. When the light appears, it is seen clearly, not rejected, not feared, simply recognized as a construct. When the voices speak, they are heard without obedience, without resistance. And in that clarity, the word arises naturally. Abba. Not spoken by the mouth, but by awareness itself. In Gnostic texts, this is described as passing through the rulers. Their forms dissolve, their jurisdiction ends. The soul moves beyond the layered heavens and returns to the source from which the spark originated. No judgment, no weighing, no review. Return. This is why the teaching is not offered as belief. Belief cannot function under pressure. Recognition can. The Church understood this risk. A person who does not fear death cannot be controlled. A person who knows their origin does not submit to false authority. A population trained in recognition cannot be harvested. So the teaching was buried, reframed, delayed. But suppression does not erase truth. It only postpones rediscovery. In every generation, some awaken without instruction. They question narratives instinctively. They resist guilt-based systems. They sense that spirituality is not meant to feel small or submissive. These are the nomadics. They often feel isolated, out of place, as if life is happening around them rather than through them. They search without knowing what they are searching for. When the teaching finds them, it feels less like learning and more like remembering. That is how recognition works. If you are hearing this and something feels activated rather than convinced, that is the spark responding, not emotionally, structurally. This is not about rejecting religion or attacking belief. It is about restoring something that predates all institutions. The source does not require worship. It requires recognition. And recognition cannot be taken away once it is stabilized. This is why practice matters now. Not tomorrow, not when life is quieter. The system thrives on delay, on someday, on later, on not yet. Recognition happens in the present. Tonight, before sleep, when the world is quieter and identity is softer, the practice is simplest. The nervous system is already shifting toward the state that mirrors transition. Awareness is closer to the surface. This is not superstition. It is neurology and consciousness aligning. Speak the word then, without expectation, without performance, without telling anyone unless you choose to. And observe. Not just what you feel in the moment, but what changes in the days that follow. What drains less, what feels clearer, what quietly falls away. Recognition reorganizes life from the inside out. You may begin to notice that certain fears no longer hook you the same way. That certain conversations feel hollow. That certain ambitions lose urgency. This is not loss, it is recalibration. The Archon system weakens when consciousness stops feeding it. This is how the prison dissolves, not through rebellion, but through remembrance. And this is the meaning beneath the story. You are not here to be saved. You are here to remember. The light is not the goal. The source is. The word is not magic. It is alignment. Jesus did not bring a religion. He brought a reminder. And it survived. Now it has reached you. What you do with it is not measured by belief, but by practice. If you choose to try this, share your experience, not to prove anything, but because recognition strengthens when it is reflected. Your words may be exactly what someone else needs to trust their own knowing. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Speak honestly, quietly, from experience, not theory. And if this resonates, stay connected. More fragments of this forgotten teaching are resurfacing. Not to convince, but to reconnect. Subscribe to the channel to continue this exploration. The gathering is not about numbers. It is about recognition. The source does not need followers. It needs remembering. And that has already begun.